Good morning, everyone. I'll remind you that we're recording and this will be put on YouTube so that we can watch it again later. And I'll share a brief statement about Dhana. In Buddhism, when Zen practitioners share their understanding of the teachings and practice, it is offered freely as a practice of Dhana Paramita. Dana is a Pali word that means generosity or to give freely, and this practice is done without expectation of getting something in return. This is the spirit of speaking about the Dharma. Other ways to practice Dana are to offer support to those who share the teachings, to support places of spiritual practice, and to give without judgment of expectation when opportunities arise. Those who share the teachings at Great Tree do so on a Dana basis. Please support their practice by giving what you can. You can either do this directly or through Great Tree, and we will pass it on to them. And so you can find the link in the chat to donate to Great Tree. And Rendo this morning has asked that all donations go directly there, all donations and contributions. Thank you. And I'll pass it to Anne for the introduction if you're ready.
Yeah. For those who aren't already familiar with Rendo, Reverend Rendo Jonathan Flaum is a Soto Zen monk who ordained at Great Tree Zen Temple in the spring of 2011 under the guidance and teaching of Reverend Tejo Munich. Rendo has been married for 25 years and has 2 teenagers. He's a writer of sorts and has spent a good chunk of time as a milkman. His business, distributing the dairy products of the Amish in North Carolina, operates out of Asheville and Charlotte. Over the course of the pandemic, he converted his kids' old playhouse into a tiny temple. You can learn more about this project and other oddities at his website, www.ashevilletinytemple.org.
Thanks so much, Anne, and thanks so much, Trey, and thanks to everybody. It's an honor to speak to you this morning. It's a great opportunity. I'm going to try to do something this morning in the talk, and I have to say on the outset that I'm just not sure I'm going to hit the mark, but I'm going to try. I'm going to try to at least graze it. It's something I've been thinking about that I've had a hard time communicating in words so far, but I'm going to give it a shot. So, I'm thinking about grandparent mind, grandmother mind, and grandfather mind. I'm going to speak this morning quite a bit about my own grandparents, particularly my grandfather, who are really, really special to me. I was thinking on the way over here, it's so emotional for me to think about my grandparents. Just when I picture their faces, it's so tender. And I was thinking, well, it's almost like when I talk about my grandparents, it's almost like talking about my children, which is kind of an odd thing to say, but they're so connected. The mark that I want to at least aim toward in this talk is that kind of tenderness and real deep human connection is somehow very subtly connected to what we say in the meal chant, in that part where we say in the beginning, may we realize the emptiness of the 3 wheels, giver, receiver, and gift. So somehow I'm going to amble along to how this very intimate relationship with other human beings ultimately shows us something that's very empty of these three wheels. I emphasize in the mail chant, it doesn't say we have realized it, but may we realize it. And I am offering this talk with the same intention. May we realize the emptiness of the three wheels, to hope to have something to offer you where I can communicate, at least point in that direction. But the easy part is to start talking about my grandparents. I want to see if I can talk about my grandparents, get in there my first real religious teacher when I was very young that I met, if there's time, and say a word about my daughter that really turned things around for me. Let me start by saying that when I was a really big baby when I was born, and I threw my mom's back out. That was my way to enter the world. I was almost 9 pounds, and my mom is 5 feet tall, and when she was not pregnant, probably weighed about 100 pounds. And she didn't have a great obstetrician, didn't give her, it waited too long, didn't have time, didn't give her a C-section. So she birthed me in a vaginal birth, and it threw her back out. And she was in traction for 6 weeks. And she couldn't be with me in the way she would want to be with me. And even after that, you know, she was still healing and recovering. And my grandmother came up and lived with us, my mom's mom, during the week when I was a baby. And my grandfather would come up on the weekends. He'd come up on Friday night, and you know, they'd stay right up until Sunday night, and then they'd go. So I got really close before I was verbal to my grandparents, and they were very, very dear. Like right now, if I really kind of hone in on it, I can just smell their scent, the both of them, which is really sweet. So my first memory is being held by my grandfather and being walked around to sleep, and him singing the song, "The Bells Are Ringing" for me and my gal. It was a song from the 1930s, and I found out later it was my grandparents' wedding song when they got married in 1939. And I remember just being on my grandfather's chest and being sung to. I remember it really well. And I just adored my grandparents, and especially adored my grandfather. I think my grandparents, I have an older sister, and who was very attached to my grandmother, so it just kind of went that way. We all were really connected, the four of us, me and my sister and my two grandparents. But I was sort of aligned a little more tightly with my grandfather in a certain way, and my sister was a little more with my grandmother, though there was a lot of crossover and there was really deep sweetness with my grandmother. But I wanted to be with my grandfather all the time. I just wanted to follow him around. And I wanted to have the hat that he had. I just really adored him. In fact, I found this picture. I don't know if you can see that real well. I'll put it in there. That's me and my grandfather. I don't know how old I was there, 5, something like that. But there he is. And where do I start? I want to tell you the story about $7, but I guess I want to say something else too, just about his way in the world. One of the things when I got a little older, and he and my grandmother would come and sleep downstairs, and I really had a hard time waiting for them to wake up, waiting for the morning till I can see him. So I really wanted my grandfather to sleep in my room, And he said, sure. So, I had a bed under my bed, a trundle bed, and I pulled out the bed and you hear me again? Okay. Sorry, guys. Anyway, I should say that even when my mom got better, my grandparents continued the practice of coming up every weekend to give my parents a break and to be with my sister and I. So on the weekends, up until I was almost 10, I just had my grandparents' full attention, and so did my sister. And I was telling you that my grandfather, at my prodding, had a sleepover with me on the weekend. So he'd, make his place in my room, take the other bed out, pull it up, and we just would sleep side by side. And I just wanted him to tell me stories, which of course he did. He never read me a children's book. My grandfather was the youngest of 5 kids, 5 brothers. And he was born here in Brooklyn. Most of his brothers were born in Russia and then came over. My grandfather was born in 1913. And I just found it fascinating. One of his brothers was a Golden Glove boxer. One was a really good dancer in the dance hall and won all these contests. One had been an army medic. One had pigeons up on the roof. And I wanted to hear all of the stories, all the antics, and I wanted to hear it over and over again. And I love the sound of his voice, and I just loved being in his presence. And the things that he did, I wanted to do. One of the things that comes up, it's early memory, where I'm in my room at night, changing from clothes into pajamas, and I took my clothes off and put them in the hamper, or getting ready to put them in the hamper, get my pajamas on, and Pop said, "Hey, Jonathan," he said, "wait a while," which was his expression with me. If I was getting, and I have to say, I wasn't a good kid. I was very mischievous. I was getting in trouble. I drove my parents crazy and teachers crazy during the week. I was always pulling pranks. I was not always very respectful to adults. But with my grandfather, I always wanted to be respectful. Not because he asked me to, but there was something about his presence that I just adored and wanted to share. So anyway, with that background, I was about to throw my clothes in the hamper, and he said, "Jonathan, wait a while," which is what he said when I was kind of getting ahead of myself and something or other. And I looked and said, "What, Pop?" He said, look at my clothes over there." So he had worn his same clothes during the day, but his were folded up and ready for the next day. He said, "Now, when you think about it, we didn't jump in a creek today. We didn't really play ball. We didn't get sweated up. We just kind of took a walk. We did this, we did that, whatever we did. A lot of days I got dirty. I was in the mud catching frogs or snakes or playing, but we didn't do that day." He said, "You can just wear these same clothes tomorrow. Because think about it. When you put them in the hamper, you got to use water. Your mom's going to do the wash, or grandma's going to do the wash. It's not as easy as just tossing those clothes away." And I was like, yeah, absolutely. It just made so much sense. And I felt really good about folding the clothes up and making them neat in my room and putting them on the next day, because that's what he was doing. And of course, he grew up in a tenement, living on the 5th floor. First, he lived in the Bronx and moved to Brooklyn. And he had a chest of 5 drawers, and each of the brothers had a drawer, and that's all the clothes that they had. And he was used to watching his mom in the kitchen washing things on a washboard, and he just never lost that sensibility of people doing work, people using water, using materials. Not only did he tell me about his brothers, but of course some of you I've mentioned this before, he just told me about his whole world, what it was like not to have a car, what it was like to know everybody in the neighborhood, to walk everywhere, for everything to be within 8 blocks, for everyone he knew in the world to be within 8 blocks, to know the Iceman, to know the Milkman, to know when the Iceman is going to carry that block up the stairs, how strong the Iceman was to put that block in the box, then how the Milkman was going to follow, then how the Vegetable Man was going to follow. Sometimes his mom didn't have the money to pay, and they just say, all right, you pay next week. How all the brothers went to work when the father got sick, how his mom was washing the floor all the time, and how when he saw her wash the floor, he wanted to wash the floor. And he was just sweet with me and kind with me and teaching me things, but I didn't realize I was being taught. He was the first person I ever met who was teaching me things without realizing I was being taught. It was just another story, and it was just something I wanted to learn, and it was just something I wanted to do. And when my mom would say to him, Dad, I don't know what to do with Jonathan. The teacher's saying this, and my grandfather would say, I don't know what you're talking about. Jonathan, he's the easiest kid. He's so good to talk to, and we take these long walks, and we talk about the frogs in the brook, and so I don't see it. So the $7 story. One of the things my grandfather did on the weekends when he came up, there was a place in town called Toys and Sports. It's like before, Walmart or Toys R Us. It was like just this little store, maybe kind of like the Toy Box in town, Asheville, like a privately owned place that sold sporting goods, and they also sold little toys and different things. So every weekend, I knew that after breakfast on Saturday morning, my grandmother and sister were going to go do something special. And my grandfather was taking me to Toys and Sports. That was just what was happening. And the deal was, when we walked in the door, he said, Jonathan, you can get anything you want. Look around, take as much time, get anything you want. And that's it. We'll go home and play with it. So that was the deal. I took my time. I got whatever I wanted. He never steered me in a direction, like get this small thing. But inevitably, I just got a bunch of little things. I got super balls. I got all these balls that we can play with. As a kid, I loved basketball and baseball. At one point, I slept with a basketball because I just loved playing it so much. I just got things that we can play with. It was really simple. Once in a while, I'd collect some other things. Most of the time, it was balls, and sometimes it was action figures, whatever. It was just a ritual that we did. I didn't think a thing of it. 1 week in that period between 0 and 9.5, he couldn't come up, which was a big deal for him not to come up. He had some bronchitis, whatever. I found out later my grandfather had a lot of heart trouble, which is another story. But he was just too sick to come up. And we talked on the phone. I said, Pop, what do you mean? I said, John, I'm sorry, okay, I got it. So he wasn't coming up that weekend. That was tough. It made the week of school feel that much longer, but it came to Saturday morning, and I was sort of, bouncing around the house. So I asked my dad. I said, Dad, can we go to Toys and Sports? Pop usually takes me, and my dad worked really hard during the week, and it wasn't something he was really aware of necessarily, or he was following all the time what we were doing. Saturday morning was some of his time. And, he's like, Jonathan, no, you'll see Pop next week. He'll do it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, I nagged him. Like I said, I was just bouncing off the walls, and I was a pain in the neck. And eventually, all right, let's go. Let's go. So we get there to Toys and Sports, and I say, all right, Dad, here's how it works. I come in, and I look around the store as long as I want, and I just get whatever I want. And my dad, I just remember what? He's like, all right, I'm like, he's like, that's how Pop does it. Yeah, that's how Pop does it. So I'm looking around the store, and I decided this week I'm not going to get a ball. I'm going to continue my collection of Jungle Jim. Jungle Jim was like an action figure, like a GI Joe type thing. But he had animals and lived in the forest and lived in a tent, etc. This was a week I decided I was going to get the tent for Jungle Jim. And I found it, and I saw it, and I said, Dad, here's what I want. And my dad said, all right. He said, that costs $7. And I said, oh, And until that time, like, I don't know how young I was. I was young. 5, maybe. I don't know. 5 or 6. For whatever reason, I just I didn't realize my grandfather was buying anything there. I just thought it was a free place. I just had no idea. I wasn't conscious of whatever it was. I wasn't paying attention to the buying part. And my dad's like, that's $7. That's a lot of money. Are you really sure you want that? And he could have said it was 10 cents or like $1 million. Like, I just didn't have the concept. So I was like, well, yeah, I have all the other Jungle Gym stuff. I really been wanting this tent. Like, I'm pretty sure. Like, yep, no, I want it. He's like, all right, we got it. But that's what, 47, 48 years ago. But I still remember when I learned what $7 was, and that's another Dharma talk kind of about my dad and I and how we went from having a very $7 kind of relationship, a very, being just really stuck in sort of relative reality, how that opened up. That's another talk. That's a great forgiveness part of my life. But what it did with, of course, I didn't think about the time. At the time when my grandfather came up the next week, I just forgot about it. It was, or obviously I didn't forget about it because I'm talking to you now. So somewhere it got in my consciousness. But in terms of the time, I forgot it. I didn't tell my grandfather about it. I didn't tell him that cost $7. It didn't come up. And it seems like when he was back, everything was free again. It's just, we just went back to things being free. So anyway, that's a little bit about who my grandfather was. I saw him as a person of just great joy, and he took absolute delight in me, made me feel completely loved, and in a way that is beyond anything I could possibly put into words. And he was that way with everybody that I saw, and especially children. He was so tender. Now, something I learned about my grandfather later is that my mom, who I always thought was an only child when I was really young, had a brother, Jerry, who she adored and who my grandparents adored. And when my mom was 18 and Jerry was 15, he drowned in a lake. And my grandparents were destroyed, as you can imagine. And as I learned that, I'm not sure what age I learned that, but I remember feeling just sad and deeply amazed, and even at such a young age, I would even say awestruck, though I never discussed it with my grandfather. We never talked about it until I was much older. That they had so much joy and just took so much joy and were just so compassionate to all beings. They were they were my first Dharma teachers, period. They just were. So anyway, knowing that, just that piece of information, need to tell you one more story about them, which also turned something around for me. This was much later. My grandparents had moved. My grandfather had a bad heart. He was having lots of angina attacks, etc. He had worked since he was 8 years old. He actually worked at the same company from 8 until 62, believe it or not. And his doctor had finally said, you need to just go move to a warmer climate. You're suffering. Your heart's not going to make it. You really should get some heart valves replaced, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, big decision. They moved to Florida. When I found out they were moving, we all cried. It was the first time in my life, I was like 9.5, when I felt, when I was a kid, like I say, I was a wild kid, so I got a lot of stitches, and stuff like that. So I had felt physical pain, but it was the first time that I felt emotional pain that was physical, where I felt I was just writhing from it. Like when I found out he was moving, I just couldn't stop crying. It really kind of just opened something up. I brought this here. This is my one piece of writing for the day, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share it or not, but I just have to do it. This is a letter from my grandfather, and I'm just gonna share this. This is a letter my grandfather wrote to me after he moved to Florida, and we were all just trying to recover. And the deal was that when he moved, that I was going to be able to go there, and I was going to be able to fly with my sister by myself, without my parents. And he'd meet us at the gate. Stewardess would take care of us on the plane, and every single vacation we had, we would fly. So just to give you a sense of my grandfather, I have this letter dated Saturday, January 28th, 1978. I was born 1968 in June. So this is, I'm 9.5. He's just moved. I just had to bring his voice into it for a minute, and then I'll start to make a Dharma point here eventually, I promise. Dear Jonathan, it will be my pleasure to print for you until you are taught how to read script. I had told, he had been writing me letters in script, and I was having trouble. So that's the first thing he said. This is letters in all caps, really big. It was great talking to you and Pamela, that's my sister, and Dorothy. Dorothy's a family friend who's taking care of us, because my parents had gone down to help them a little bit move in. You sound very grown up, even more than when we saw you 4 weeks ago. You speak slowly and clearly and tell me interesting things. Do not be upset if you cannot write as often as you like. I understand that you're busy with school, homework, Hebrew, basketball, and I know you have many friends. I love you just the same. You're the only type of grandson that I prayed for. I can't think about him without that happening. So, I'll just continue. You're the best. We're very lucky to have a great granddaughter like Pamela and a grandson like you. Pamela's very sweet, very understanding. When I told her we're trying to make plans to entertain you, she said, Pop, just seeing you and Nan is enough for us. You have a great sister, you're a good brother, and you have great parents. We're deeply proud of all of you. One of the reasons we're able to move to Florida was that we knew that you all love each other and that you always take care of each other. There's a driving range nearby where all of us can hit golf balls. I'm not ready to play on a course yet. It'll be a while before I can take lessons. We will go swimming if it's warm, do some sightseeing, see Aunt Ruth and Uncle Murray, and visit any place or anybody you want to see. I know that we'll have a good time together. We will definitely have our new sleeper couch for the den with a TV and a stereo. I think it'd be a good idea to take along one warm jacket in case the weather stays cool. Mom and Dad will tell you about our place, but you'll have to see it to appreciate it. I'm giving this letter to Mom because I want you to get it faster than the mail. Keep up the good work in school and in Hebrew, and I hope your team wins every game. Nan and I send our love to you, Pamela, and many, many, many kisses. Soon we'll be seeing you and Pamela. It'll be great, etc. So, yeah, that letter's 43 years old, and it's just amazing to me that that connection for those first 9 years. And then he taught me to play golf in Florida, and we did fly down on every chance that we got, every vacation. I'm gonna skip real quick to when I was in my 20s, and something came up with my grandparents that really pointed to where I'm going here, this emptiness of giver, receiver, and gift. My sister and brother-in-law at the time had rented a house in the sea in Long Island over the summer. It's around the time for my grandparents' birthday. My mom and stepdad were going to be there, my sister and brother-in-law, my young niece and nephew. My wife and I, we weren't married yet. We were just dating at the time. We were in graduate school in Tallahassee, Florida. One of the reasons I wanted to be in Tallahassee, Florida, because I knew it was close to my grandparents in southern Florida, so I can see them even more at that time and be with them for holidays and etc. And Tammy got to know them really well, my wife. At the time, my girlfriend. And it was Nan's birthday over the summer, and they were going up to New York. And Tammy and I were seeing them a lot anyway in Florida, so we were like, no, we have a lot going on in grad school. We're gonna skip this trip, but we'll see you soon. I don't know, maybe we hadn't seen them in a couple of months, and we were gonna skip this one and skip seeing the family. And I don't know what it was. I got off the phone with my mom or my grandma, one of them. And I just heard something in their voice that was like, oh, that's fine. We'll see you next time and everything. But something like, man, it sure be nice to see you, just something like that. And I don't know what it was, but I got off the phone and I looked at Tammy. I said, let's just go, forget the schoolwork, whatever doing. Let's just go make the trip. She said, yeah, let's do it. I said, but now they think we're not going, so we can surprise them, So, I love to be silly. I know, Dharma talks in our time to be silly, so you're not necessarily saying that part of me. But I really love to be silly, and I love to play jokes. So at the time, for whatever reason, we decided that we got these kind of like asbestos, like if you're something you'd wear when you're cleaning asbestos, these white jumpsuits and wigs, and I got a beard and a mustache. It was gray. And we decided, and I knew my sister was renting this house, so I cooked up this idea that we're going to go up there and pretend to be painters that the owners had sent us, and we're going to knock on the door, and then we got to take measurements. And so, we went up there, we parked the car a couple of houses away, walked up, we had paint brushes and ruler, tape measure. And I walked in the house, really thick New York accent, and my wife, is from Louisiana, so she was sort of following a thick Louisiana accent, that we're painters and we have to, measure the house for the owners, and I'm sorry you're renting it right now. And it was breakfast time. We drove up the night before, stayed in a hotel, and got there really early in the morning when it would be breakfast time. And we didn't tell anybody we were coming. And we were being very invasive and very kind of silly and, whatever. And my family just wasn't catching on, and I thought they'd catch on immediately, but they weren't. And eventually my sister caught on. She didn't say anything right away, and then my stepdad caught on. Then everyone caught on. It was like this just sort of amazing, where everyone was so happy we're there. We can't believe we made the trip. And you know how surprises can be sometimes. It was just and we had the most amazing day that day. It was, everything was spontaneous, everything flowed, the weather was really good, there was a pool on the property, we all swam, everybody laughed. It was really, really sweet, really, really dear. And then at the end of the day, my grandmother's like, I'm not feeling well. Like, she had some vertigo, which she got every once in a while. And she's like, I have to just lay down. So sort of everybody went with her, was sort of following her in. I remember just laying down on a kind of a day bed or something right there. And she started to try to talk about the day a little bit. And then she just started to cry. And then she started to really wail. It was like, I thought about this. This was, I think, memory was prompted for me when we're in this, rereading The Light That Shines Through the Universe, Katagiri Roshi. And in there, he's talking about this deep cry kind of at the bottom of your life, this deep moan. And that's what I heard from my grandmother, just sobbing. And all she can get out was, I just wish he was here to see this. And, everyone just knew she was talking about her son all these years later. And that prompted tears from my grandfather, and brought up a lot of stuff for my mom. So my mom had to just sort of go out of the room, and my sister went with my mom, and someone else, my stepdad was taking care, and et cetera, et cetera. And eventually she cried for a period of time. She eventually fell asleep. And then when she woke up, she wanted to talk to everybody. And she did. And she said, I just felt so much joy today. It just felt so good for everyone to be together, and to have that surprise, and to see Jonathan and Tammy step out of that. I thought they were, she was kind of the last one to get it when we were dressed up. So I just thought they were painters. And just to step out of it like that, I just thought, her son's name was Jerry. Maybe Jerry can just come back, And she was talking in a way at that point where she was at peace. She wasn't crying anymore. She was just processing it, and the family was kind of processing it. And I remember just again feeling how much, when joy is felt to the depth, sorrow comes up. Somehow that joy and sorrow, like they're just like a gasho. They're just so intimately connected when you let yourself feel all the way to the bottom. So obviously that really stayed with me, and stays with me, and informs a lot about how I see the Dharma, and why I need it so desperately. in my life. I'm gonna say a few words here about something that's happened over the last few months that somehow directly relates to this and somehow has made the turn of, may we realize the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. And I should say this about great joy and about great sorrow. And I guess the great sorrow I saw in my grandmother, it was sort of transcendent to her personality, that wail. It was something that felt was coming not from her personality, but from just kind of a place beyond. So let's just, put a placeholder on that. So over this course of this last year, during the pandemic, I have two teenagers, and with that, they've had some difficulty during the pandemic, particularly my youngest, who is 15. And just before the pandemic started, she was very involved in her Taekwondo school and had gotten her second degree black belt in Taekwondo and was teaching younger people Taekwondo. And then when the pandemic happened, she couldn't go to Taekwondo anymore. That stopped. The barn where she was riding her horse, she can no longer go there. That place had closed down during the pandemic. The choice we had to make when we saw what was happening right at the beginning of the pandemic, even though we were pretty sure we couldn't afford to do it, we knew we bought her a horse because that was one thing she was able to do, and to stable that horse somewhere in town, because the rule was at that time that if you actually own livestock, kind of a loophole here, and you had to go feed it, you can do that even during the pandemic. So we felt like she can at least have that. She's a very proficient jumper and really loves horses. But even with that, and during the pandemic, as things had dropped away, we noticed she was becoming more and more upset, obviously isolated, depressed, and I was really having trouble getting her out of bed in the morning to do schoolwork or even to go now see her horse. She just felt like her life, everything that she had, everything that she was connected to, felt over, and all the teenage angst that had been rolling along in her, but she had a lot of kind of, I guess, protection around that and support around that. That protection and support, besides her parents, her very intimate circle and her brother, had dropped away. And now a lot of the stuff she was working on, like her identity, which teenagers are working on intensely, and it's very intense for her, really working on issues of sexuality and issues of gender and everything. Her path was she had just taken on so much, such a strong individual. But even in her great strength, without the support and the usual things that she had become a bit distraught, depressed, and very angry. But but still I had to get her out of bed in the morning. And I was been trying different ways over the course of time. I was singing to her through the door. I was telling her potential bribes through the door to get her up. I was telling jokes through the door. I was being silly. I was giving pep talks. I was doing all these things. And it really wasn't working. I was standing in front of her door 20 minutes, 30 minutes. It would take her a really long time to get up. And then when she got up, she was still really angry at me. Eventually we'd get out to the barn. I would just sort of forget about schoolwork. And I found that if I would get the horse and start grooming the horse and things, and she can get to ride, after the ride something would happen and she'd feel better, you know. Something about being in that seat of the horse, making that connection, and I'd sort of see her again, some real sweetness, something would sort of come forth, but something very silently and very something you couldn't put into words happened between her and the horse that brought her some relief. But even though this happened, still the next day the same resistance would be there. So it was this kind of same thing in the morning, how to get up, and how for her to open her door. And for some reason, I don't know why, before I went to bed that night, I just said, the next morning I'm just going to bring her a tray. And I know she loves hot chocolate. She kind of likes miso soups. Maybe she gets some of the health from miso soup. But I know she loves hot chocolate and marshmallows in it. So I'm going to make a tray. And so the next morning I woke up and I made the tray, and I made sure that, the miso soup was just right. I had the chopsticks there so she can stir the bottom if it's settled a little bit. And I made the hot chocolate just right, and the marshmallows, and I set up the napkin and the spoon and, all of that. And I went to her door, and I put the tray down for a minute, and I knocked, and I said, I have a tray for you, through the door. And she said, well, just leave it at the door. I said, I can't, because the dogs will get it, and the dogs shouldn't have chocolate. And I know how she loves the dogs, so of course that overrid everything. And she opened the door, and she said, okay, you can come in and you can set the tray there. And I went in and I set the tray down, and I went out and I closed the door. And without thinking about it, when I closed the door, I just did this. And my body gave myself a shudder. And I said, where have I done that before? And I knew I had done it right here in this Rendo. Serving tea, I had made a tray before, and I had put tea in it, and I had served it and done this. And at the table, during mealtime, serve, and for whatever reason, without really being able to process it in the moment, I just felt great energy. I felt like my problem has been solved. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to do anything. I can just bring the tray up in the morning. So I just kept bringing the tray, and she opened the door, and would come out much more pleasant. And she'd say to me sometimes, hey, can you go get the tray and put it back so I can just come down and, we can get the horse stuff. And I said, yeah, get the tray, put it back, do the dishes, clean the tray, have it ready for the next morning. Boom, And then one day she said to me, and she would sort of forget herself and forget she was so angry and forget different things. And she would sort of snuggle up to me sometimes and just everything would soften up, She would just not know why, but everything would soften up and she'd want to be close, hold my neck or just snuggle in there, like the old times. And one day she just said, Dad, you don't have to bring the tray anymore. Don't bring it. So, I'll get up. All right. So she started getting up. But one of the things I realized from that tray is that it was I had run out of tricks. I had run out of my human capacity, my own Jonathan personality to help her. She was somewhere that couldn't receive my help in that way, but she could receive the tray. She can receive something in silence, even though she didn't understand why she wanted to receive it, and I really didn't understand why she could receive it. But somehow in that process, to me, I thought it came to me the emptiness of the three wheels: giver, receiver, and gift. And also back to my grandparents. When I think about my grandparents, or I think about my children, or I think about what happens here in the Dharma world, in the Zendo, and just kind of in the Buddha field of reality, it's beyond our personality. It's sort of beyond what our small self can do. When the sorrow is really deep, we have a hard time talking ourselves out of that sorrow in conventional ways, and we have a hard time talking another person out of their sorrow in conventional ways. And we somehow meet them at a place that's it isn't our own personality. It's just like Buddha to Buddha. It's just like Buddha is there, because you need Buddha to be there, and you just realize in our practice here, in our practice in Zen, on the outside, to an outsider, it can look very formal. The robes can look very formal. The silence can look formal. The gasho, the bows, the prostrations, they can look formal, But when my daughter wasn't talking to me and was in great distress, that the tray and the bow is what I can do, and for me, the offering the tray and just being neutral, being empty, I knew whatever her anger and sadness and deep confusion and all those things, she wasn't really angry at me. I just sort of, I was out of it, but yet completely in it. Just wanted to be completely there. So where the energy of Jonathan kind of ran out, the sort of fuse was out, Buddha's energy kind of came in. And I think that was the kind of energy that my grandparents had, and that grandparent mind. even from that great sorrow, somehow they went beyond. And as I conclude, trying to somehow graze this mark, in thinking about the meal chant, may we realize the emptiness of the three wheels, giver, receiver, and gift, how it's all just sort of interlocked there. When you don't let go for some philosophical reason, you let go because you have to. Because yourself isn't enough. Your small self. It's not enough to save all beings. It's not enough to save one. So you have to let go. And it brings me to that final piece of the meal chant that the leader says that always has just moved me when I hear it. Abiding in this ephemeral world like a lotus in muddy water, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha. It's like, here we are, it's muddy. We're abiding in this world of impermanence, this difficult world. Nevertheless, the mind is pure and goes beyond. Thus we bow to Buddha. How does it happen? I don't know. From exhaustion, from deep love and tenderness, from wanting to meet other people that much. It doesn't come from philosophical understanding, not in my experience. It seems to come from the deepest love and tenderness, where something happens where you just want to go beyond and rest, as Katagiri Roshi would say, bask in Buddha's compassion. Just rest there with your family and with all beings, this entire family.